I got this Pinkie Pie mini figure from Funism. I like bought it secondhand so I could get the clown one, and I'm so happy. She comes with this little card. I put it in like a standee, and then this little blue balloon dog. A few years ago I wrote an essay for school titled Tim Burton is a Goth Freak, and all of his movies are about that. At the time, Wednesday had not been released or even announced yet, so this was an observation made purely from his classic films. I bought several books or biographies about Tim Burton for that essay, but you could really glean an understanding of his history by just watching like 3 interviews featuring him. Burton grew up in Burbank, California during the 60s, and during this time there was this really heavy societal emphasis on conformity. So if you were different, you were basically accused of being a communist. And being a communist was like being a sex offender or a serial killer back then. There was also fear of nuclear war, Russia in general. Everyone was the same, and if you weren't the same, you were bad, and this was frightening to him. So after Burton went to CalArts and had a failed animation career at Disney because he drew things too grotesquely, he fell into filmmaking. Burton always had an interest in dark things. Disney actually, like during his time there, gave him $60,000 to make his own short film, since he was very undeniably talented, but just like wasn't a good fit for their studio. In that film, Vincent, we see the story of a young boy who, to the chagrin of his mother and everyone around him, is inspired by the dark works of Vincent Price and wants to be just as dark and broody. But his mom is like, no, you're not a dark, broody vampire, go outside and play. Now, I believe that since the making of that film, Tim Burton has basically just made Vincent over and over and over again. I appreciate that artists can have overarching themes in their work. I don't even think like outcast protagonist is specifically Burton, or that it's a bad theme and anyone who uses it is out of touch, but I sometimes wonder if Burton can make anything else. I guess he doesn't need to, because his fortune is like made already. Like, I don't think he can sell out any more than he already has by making another spooky protagonist film. So after Disney, his first non-Disney film was Pee-wee Herman. So Pee-wee Herman happened, and then we got a whole bunch of films after that I think make his career, and I think I can sum up most of those films with like one formula. So stop me if you've heard this one before, okay? Weirdo protagonist, maybe a bit spooky, maybe a bit dorky or goth, is not understood by the people around them. Everyone around them is the same, and they don't get what the protagonist's deal is. They are uncomfortable with their eccentric personality, except for one person with a heart of gold. So Batman in general, I guess, is a gloomy outcast guy, but Burton, in the public eye at least, kind of made it that way. He defined Batman as an outcast, or like brooding somewhat, I think, to larger audiences, because at the time, Batman comics had really faded in popularity, so the general public believed Batman to be his goofy persona from his live-action show in 1966. I think instead Burton brought this, like, implicit darkness to Batman, both visually and thematically. The sale of Batman comics was, like, crazy low. Like, I don't even think they were in the top 10 before Tim Burton's Batman came out. He changed the game, but he did make Vincent again. So Nightmare Before Christmas, which I argue kind of strays from this theme a little, actually, because the townspeople already idolize and like Jack Skellington, but they really only understand him as he serves Halloween and not Christmas. So I guess you could say that he's still doing something that is new and maybe uncomfortable to the townspeople, and they don't really understand, but they do go along with it because they trust this guy. But Burton didn't even direct Nightmare. Nightmare Before Christmas was directed by Tom Selleck, I want to remind everyone, but Burton's visual influence, I think, just determined that film as a Burton film to the average consumer. So the thing is, like, this thematic repetition doesn't even take away from my enjoyment of any of Tim Burton's films, but I think when I watch Wednesday, I'm reminded of his attachment to this theme because in some ways it works against him. I think Tim Burton wanted to design this show with the intention that Wednesday is disliked because she's weird and she's creepy and she's goth, and that's why nobody likes her. And I think Tim Burton doesn't realize that being goth and spooky is not a social death sentence anymore unless you're like in a really conservative area, or it's more likely that he knows this and it disturbs him because it's not relevant anymore to complain about it. In Netflix's Wednesday, Wednesday Addams is in a school for outcasts, for weirdos, and she's not in a stuffy suburb. They're still unable to let go of this theme, so the show is just kind of forced to make Wednesday unlikable. Wednesday is disliked not because she's goth and spooky, but because she's kind of mean to everyone. She says that she secretly enjoys that the general population dislikes her. She won't accept affection from anyone. She's generally reckless and spends the show like jerking her friends around. But sometimes it's fine because she was right about something. When the whole school adores her, she's disgusted because they're all mindless sheeple to her. And I'd be pissed off at that oil painting too, honestly, but Wednesday is just not allowed to have any social wins, and it gets exhausting and like frustrating to watch. So Burton himself has become a trope, not to his complete discredit, but this show also like is built heavily on tropes. Stop me if you've heard this one before. A child who feels misunderstood or neglected by their family is sent away to this boarding school filled with other students just like them who have magical powers or otherwise and have also been sent away by their families to be among their kind. The main character, and by proxy the viewer, can imagine themselves being categorized into one of 4 cliques. And during the story, they will discover their predetermined destiny and the history that their parents have with the school along the way. The characters of Wednesday are also tropey, have been defined to consumers already. I know that Enid will respond certain ways to certain situations because I know that she's the cheerful, happy character, not because I spent the show getting to understand her decision making. The same way I can predict Wednesday's response to certain situations because she's the snarky goth girl, as Enid so aptly defined her in episode 1. The other surrounding characters, really until we got to know Agnes and Bianca better, were similar levels of plain or undefined, or predefined, you could say. And any of the Addams family members, actually, besides Thing, I guess, are characters that we already knew and were familiar with, so it's not even that those characters are just tropey, but they were written already, and we know who they are. Kiana Doherty, in her video about the reality of processed food, she makes this distinction between processed food and ultra-processed food. She makes a point that ultra-processed food is food that is impossible for consumers to recreate without, like, industrial equipment. Much of this ultra-processed food is made of a starch slurry, which is just like starchy mush, and this is flavored and filled with chemicals and sugar and then reshaped to take a form that customers might recognize as edible. And Kiana defines this type of food as pre-digested. So the work to break this food down has been done for us already, so the body has to do less work to like get it through and like into your bloodstream, and because of this it keeps us full for a shorter amount of time than like whole-bodied foods would. And so I argue that Netflix's Wednesday is just ultra-processed food. It's pre-digested. The Addams Family characters are borrowed. They existed already, so they're pre-digested. The character tropes of the show are pre-digested, so the characters are tropey. They stick to a archetype for a large part of the show. The premise of the show is pre-digested. We all know what Harry Potter is, and the outcast aspect of it is Burton's thing, and that's pre-digested. I actually think this just speaks to the larger state of Hollywood, where studios are just repeating themselves over and over and over again because they know what viewers have digested already, and they foolishly believe we won't want to consume anything else. Now, I got into an early preview screening of Wednesday for season 2, episode 1, a week before it premiered. Let me get my... Look, I got this popcorn box with Wednesday on it. I should have had these in the background. And I also got this wristband. Look at me with my wristband. I don't know that anyone else in the theater kept the popcorn box, but I did. They had these funny slides before it started, written in the voice of Wednesday, that were like telling you in an in-character way to put your phone away or like beg you to post the event on social media. The theater was packed full of goths and other weirdos, and I think that hype added to my enjoyment of the episode. Also, seeing the serial killer guy make a little doll of Wednesday has inspired me to go on my own venture to make a doll of myself, and I've been hunting for a good base to repaint ever since. I think Wednesday is an overall, like, it's a show that you can enjoy. It's possible for you to enjoy it, but you have to lower your expectations. I thought Wednesday, directed and produced by Tim Burton, would sort of bear this intellectual responsibility towards the Addams Family legacy. I knew that this show would be safe for kids, but I didn't realize that at times it would reach the same tone that a Disney Channel original movie would. I was getting kind of corned out with the first episode when I started watching it, but there's a point in that episode where Enid, to show that she's a werewolf, unsheaths her claws at Wednesday, and she's like, "Careful, this kitty's got claws," and she's not afraid to use them. And I closed the app and I stopped watching for the rest of the night. And this was after the characters like name dropped the top 3 social medias, just in case the writers were scared the script wouldn't age itself fast enough. They started arguing via emojis described verbally at one point. This is all the first episode. To get past how corny it was, I had to pretend that I was an adult who remembered this show fondly from their youth and was now rewatching it with my new maturity, and I could laugh at how certain parts were kind of cheesy looking back. And this strategy increased my enjoyment of the show so much that it became a guilty pleasure of mine. But I don't think it's a glowing endorsement to be like, this show is great if you pretend you're 12. Wednesday Addams, the character, has been always actually a huge inspiration of mine since I was like a child. I spent my entire 6th grade year wearing my hair in braids, but I was a little brown girl, so everyone around me just called me Pocahontas, which was, yeah. I don't think anyone can blame me for this show being a guilty pleasure of mine, just going off of like the basic bullet points alone. Wednesday is a show about my childhood goth icon, now suggested to be of Mexican heritage, if the occasional references in writing are to be believed, who is now played by a Puerto Rican woman. Those are 3 boxes right there on the relevant to confetti list. And those are superficial things. Like, they don't make the show good, but they do provide the level of novelty necessary for me to actually sit down and watch a show with hour-long episodes. I have general thoughts on season 2, part 2 maybe more specifically. Season 2 establishes at the beginning of part 1 that Wednesday is having this reoccurring premonition about Enid's death, and this is like the framework for all of part 1. And then after the episode where Wednesday and Enid switch bodies, Lady Gaga just kind of gives like vague references to death while Wednesday is in Enid's body, and this just makes that premonition go away. And then we have a new premonition. And I just don't think that was a good resolution. I don't think that was a resolution at all. That situation was just not resolved. I actually really enjoyed the acting skill demonstrated by both actresses in that episode. I feel like with the first season, Jenna Ortega and Emma Myers kind of tripped over their lines a lot, like as if their mouths were dry. It happened a few times throughout that season, and it was kind of distracting. Like I kept having that thought, like they didn't want to do another take of that, or like clip in a different take where that line went better. The body swap episode showed their growth a lot. I was actually having trouble determining, for at least the first like 5 minutes, I was struggling to determine if the actresses were speaking in their own voices or if they were acting over dubs of the other person's character that like their counterpart recorded, or like they recorded their lines and then the other actress dubbed over it, like because they just did such a good job replicating each other. That was maybe the most fun episode to watch. I thought it was weird that the woman from the psych ward was not Ophelia and was actually Tyler's mom. I just feel like the show mentioned Ophelia like way more often, but when Wednesday rescues this woman, she looks up at Wednesday and says, "What kind of angel are you?" and like shows warmth towards Wednesday. I assumed it was Ophelia, and then it wasn't her, and I was like, well, since when do we care about Tyler's mom? We mentioned her, what, like once? And then we just stopped talking about Ophelia, and then we find out the truth at the end. We find out the truth, the viewers, but not the characters. I was glad to see Weems come back. I actually think she's like perfect for Wednesday as a spirit guide. I think her teasing at the beginning with the sponge bath is hysterical. We never saw that like playful side of her in the first season, so that was a really exciting watch. Principal Dort was a fun villain to watch. I don't know how they got this A-list actor. He very convincingly plays the role of like kind of dorky principal, But I guess he's also playing the role of, like, evil guy who's playing the role of dorky principal. And even that is convincing. So I don't know if I cared for the dance sequence. I think because the whole time I was just kind of like, oh, they're using this dance to level out the coolness levels between Agnes, Enid, and Wednesday. It's meant to be like the spiritual successor to Wednesday's dance. And to me, that seemed like the ultimate purpose of the scene, even though it had other things going on that moved the plot forward. And I'm glad that it did. I think its second highest purpose was to cameo Lady Gaga's new song that I can't even remember.
Okay.
During this scene, we see the students disarming Dort by getting Agnes to get rid of his anti-siren amulet. And also, this scene resolves the tension between Enid and Agnes, because during the rest of the season they'd been like battling for Wednesday's attention. I was kind of prepared for this scene to be cringe, but honestly I think the actresses did pretty well. I don't get the sense that they were dancers in their career before. Like, I don't think this dance was meant to be a cameo of their dance skills. Like, oh look, this actress was a professional dancer before and we're cameoing that skill. Like, I don't think it was that. And I know that every other channel has probably already said this, but how did they add this additional joint choreography in the time between this scene and their first conversation about it, which was implicitly like an hour before? And I think my final thought with season 2 is I noticed the fandom has this belief that Tyler x Wednesday as a pairing is dead. I think they believe that the writers learned their lesson, and I disagree. I would not put that kind of faith in this show. And I had this belief before we had part 2 of this season. Honestly, like the first episode of season 2, I was like, oh, this ship is back. They're not killing it. And I don't know how anyone could have had any other assessment than that, seeing Hunter Doohan chained up and like shirtless and like kind of damp and like very muscular and like staring down at Wednesday with a fierce gaze. I got kind of uncomfortable during that scene because Tyler is like implicitly Wednesday's age, so like arguably a minor. But then I looked it up and Hunter Doohan, the actor, is 31 years old. Apparently he actually gets typecasted a lot as a youth in his career. I think also in an interview, or I guess Jenna said this. Jenna said, I think it was her, that during this scene her and Hunter were like struggling to reduce the sexual tension between them while they were acting. Like, the sexual tension coming across in this scene. The scene in the psych ward wasn't meant to have any suggestive undertones, but even by the own actor's admission, it did. So I know my perception of that scene is not crazy, but it does make me question if I'm supposed to consider that tension canon or not. Like, the tension was not meant to be there, but it was, and the actors admit it. So do I, as a viewer, still perceive that tension as real and canon, or do I ignore it because the actors said it was accidental? Anyway, I knew they weren't going to kill Hope for that pairing entirely, and when Wednesday failed to kill Tyler at the end, I was like, there it is. This is my hot take. I actually argue that Wednesday and Tyler could work. I am not opposed to Wednesday finding romance, but they have to do it in a way where it's in character for her. I think the kiss in season 1 was like not well timed at all. It came out of nowhere and it was not in character. Wednesday is a slow burn kind of girl. You're not gonna get her that easily. I actually think the date that Tyler took her on where he like made her watch Legally Blonde in the crypt, I forget where that was, in some spooky area, that was actually a really good date for the both of them. And I think if he had kept doing that for like the rest of the season, I could maybe see them like just holding hands at the end. Like, that's it. Because honestly, Wednesday treated Tyler like a worm, like in the same way she treated everyone else like worms. And he was like, Wednesday, you're confusing me. You're giving me all these signs. And I was like, what signs? And she's making you do menial labor for her. What are you talking about? But I guess Wednesday is written to be so cold that I guess you could perceive this as affection if you're desperate enough. People are regarding Tyler as irredeemable, but honestly, with the mechanics of how a Hyde works and their master, it seems like the writers are gearing up to just be like, oh, well, Tyler was just being controlled, and he really did like Wednesday, but his masters were making him be mean to her. Or like that maybe being a Hyde just like messes with his head, and we could actually get a nice normal boy out of Tyler if he just learns to control it, and then the Hyde can be this weapon that he whips out when he's in trouble, like how Enid can be a werewolf when she needs to be. And I think for a girl like Wednesday, and she says this too, that it's her type, but like a mass murderer, serial killer guy, that suits her perfectly. Like a guy with a dark past, a dark secret, perfect for Wednesday Addams. Or a polar opposite person to Wednesday could work. So Enid, I think, would be a really good romantic pairing with Wednesday. I don't know why shipping them is seen as such a stretch. I just think some people don't want to see the fandom like woking it up or whatever, but like shipping the two main characters of any show, regardless of gender, is just like an easy reach. When I'm watching Wednesday, I can see that the show is like mediocre in writing. I know that, but I think that the gothic elements, Tim Burton's influence, this dark academia fantasy, these are all things that I like so much that I can become invested in the show by proxy. And that's not a good endorsement for me to be like, this show had to contain other stuff kind of unrelated to its writing for me to enjoy it. I love Wednesday's outfit. The interviews with the costume designer are a great watch. She describes a lot of methods of finding specific pieces for Wednesday's outfits that I think any goth worth their salt has employed while thrifting. I spoke about this in my very first video, but I think there's certain media that I claim turned me goth. The reality is like the goth was already there, but the media like helped me connect with it more. When I was a little kid, I would daydream about being like a vampire, pixie, princess. I would have self-insert like gothic OCs, and my video game avatars were kind of emo. Wednesday for me brings me back to that headspace. When I watch Wednesday, I think 7-year-old Confetti would have loved this. 7-year-old Confetti would have wanted to be Wednesday Addams for Halloween. Oh wait, I was Wednesday for Halloween. How interesting. I think Netflix's Wednesday is doing something similar for a little goth girl out there in the world right now, and I hope she gets to wear all the black clothes she wants.
What's so great about being yourself when you can be like everyone else?
Do not speak to your mother that way.